Okay, I'm here with HuK. Hello.
Hi.
Okay, we're here at IPL at the moment, but when I release this, it'll be a little bit afterwards. So the first place I want to start talking to you about is, since you've lived in Korea for so long and now you've been in EG for quite a while, kind of sum up for me like the early period of your career, because look, as an observer, like I remember things seemed quite different in terms of how the community perceived you. Like they thought you were kind of like one-dimensional. You were just a four-gator guy who just played on ladder, and when you went to lands you did crazy things like Mothership Rush and stuff, and so there was this perception that you weren't a very serious player, or you weren't going to be a top competitive player. But then you obviously decided to go to Korea. So what was that period like the whole time? Had you been trying to become like a top player? What was the moment you decided like, no, I'm going to go all in on this?
When I decided to go to Korea, it was just I kind of decided that esports was going to be my career. So I don't know. I always was a serious player. I always played to win, and I think I'm going to continue doing that no matter what. That's always the priority. Obviously, if I can have fun with the game and Mothership Rush or do whatever, then I'm going to do that when possible. But ever since, even before I went to Korea, that was the goal, to be the best.
When you think of that period of time when you first got to Korea, I mean, the famous comments now where you said, I have the top 3 control, and I was the best player at Assembly even though you'd lost. And that was like the first Western tournament you'd been to, as far as I remember, after Korea. So does that mean within your first months you already felt like you'd gotten to this really, really high level compared to what you were at before? Or were you already at that confidence level? Like, what made you say these comments? Were you kind of high off the fact that you'd gotten all this practice in Korea?
Yeah, Korea definitely changes things, and I definitely felt when I made those comments that I was one of the best players, if not the best, at the tournament. StarCraft 2, everybody knows it, top players know it, and everybody within the community that involved should know that even if you're the best player, you have a very small chance of winning a tournament. There's so many aspects that come into winning a tournament, like bracket luck, how you play that day, how you sleep the night before, what you eat that day, so many different dynamics. So, I don't think it was like just a boastful comment when I said it at the time. I actually believed it. I think, Korea just gave me confidence.
In terms of your actual game, is it exaggerating things to say you were just forgetting before you went and you hadn't really refined other aspects of your game what you did when you went to Korea? Or how did Korea change you in that sense?
I think it's a bit of an unfair comment. There's a lot of sensational things that are said within the community like that, or the community is very harsh. If you're not winning and you lose, even the next tournament you play in, the community will be pretty harsh sometimes. I definitely was a more developed player than what the community thought at that time, and I definitely got even more developed once I went to Korea. So I think just overall the community can be very harsh, and they have a very short memory of results or strategies you use or whatever.
When we think of the first foreigners to go to Korea, it's perhaps a little unfair for the ones who came after that Jinro went and had such early success, because it seems like kind of the formula now, even if you're a top player, is it takes maybe 4 or 5 months before you can even figure out how to compete in GSL, how to get good placings. Otherwise people tend to just get knocked out immediately out of Code A, or even if they get a direct seed, they go straight out. It took you until about, correct me if I'm wrong, wasn't it about 7 or 8 months before you started to get like really into the deep stage, like round of 16, round of 8 of the brackets of GSL? Was this kind of the formula that you saw? Why do you think it takes so long to adjust to that Korean style?
I think overall it was just a lot of practice, not even Korean style necessarily. I practiced in Korea for 8 or 9 months, like you said, before I got far in GSL, or before I posted any real results on Team Liquid. People seem to forget and think that I just had like a very good run on Team Liquid the whole time I was on the team. I was only on the team for about 10 months. And to be honest, like 7 or 8 of those months, I posted absolutely no results, never did anything, didn't even qualify for Code A, lost every foreign tournament I ever went to. And then I had my breakthrough at Dreamhack and Home Story. And then after that, of course, I got seeded into GSL and got pretty far. But it's just the way practice works for a lot of players, if not the majority, is that even if you practice a week before a tournament really hard, it will not show that tournament most likely. It's, when you practice 8 or 9 months hard, and then all of a sudden your results will start showing. So people misjudge how quickly practice is supposed to affect your play, and it takes a while to develop.
Okay, so actually on these lines, I remember actually when you won Dreamhack Summer, a lot of people, the question they were asking was like, what changed now that you suddenly won the tournament, whereas before you weren't doing very well in these tournaments? And you were kind of adamant at the time that like nothing necessarily changed, that just won this tournament. So give me like a timeline, like when was it you think that you got to like the level that you then showed in these like top level, the win home story cup, the Dreamhack Summer?
It's hard to judge because your own perception of your play can be very misconstrued based on results. I mean, if you're not winning anything and you feel like you're playing really, really well in practice games, but then you don't have any tournament results, you start to question everything. There will always be a lot of practice partners / people that are really, really good in practice. I know even people like MC in StarCraft 1, he was like a very solid player. In practice games, he took games off the best players, but he never had results in StarCraft 1 because he just choked, he didn't have confidence, stress, whatever. It didn't work for him. So it's kind of hard to say. I was obviously very confident when I went to Azus or however you pronounce it. Yeah. So it depends on each person, but I think people's perceptions of themselves can either be too good or too bad depending on how confident and boastful they are.
So in line with that then, thinking back in terms of what you're saying about how good you can be in practice or not necessarily shown just in the tournament results, is there a period in time that you can pick out from your career when you think like that was when I was at my peak, even if it didn't necessarily max up to the best results? Was there a period?
I think it would be a little bit before Dreamhack or a little bit after. I think I kind of fell off right before my Orlando win. Okay. So even though I won Orlando, I wasn't practicing as hard then as I was before. Basically, when I first went to Korea and before I went to Korea when I was in Canada, I practiced like 10, 12 hours a day, and all I thought about was StarCraft 2. So that means even when I'm not practicing, I'm just sitting there thinking about it. Like if I'm watching TV, I zone out from TV, I'm thinking about StarCraft 2. Now it's not so much that. I've become more efficient about practice, so the hours I do put into the game are more quality than quantity, and it helps me kind of balance that factor, but obviously my results have fallen off since then. It really depends. It's hard to say, obviously, but I would say it'd be close to or in between my Dreamhack and Orlando wins.
Since during the period when you won like those 3 tournaments in like I think it was about 4 months or maybe less, that's when people said like, oh, HuK is the best foreigner, and so you were getting a lot of props in this sense. There's also like a kind of there's a type of critic I've noticed that talks about your biggest successes, and they figure out like one reason each time as to why it like doesn't count. So for example, at Dreamhack they could say in the other half of the bracket it was sort of like a clusterfuck of people. Like I think like MC beat Idra, then MC lost to Bomber, then Bomber lost to Moon, and then Moon played you. So you could make the point that a harder player could have played you in the final. And at MLG, people say the structure means that if you win the group, you get to directly go to the semi-finals essentially. So you can kind of win in. I think you only have to win 3 series essentially to once you get to the playoffs. So anyway, these are just like obvious criticisms that people make. Is there any merit to those? Like if you compare those to other people's wins, is there something to it?
I think you can always do that. There's a lot of different aspects you can do that. You can say matchups like, oh, their best matchup was PVT and he played only PVTs, or oh, he lucked out and he didn't have such an easy bracket. I mean, there's always going to be those stipulations. And like I said, every top player and every good community member that's very involved in esports should understand that to win a tournament like IPL or Dreamhack or GSL or whatever, you have to play very well. But you have to get lucky on the bracket too, and you have to play better than your average game on the important matches, and there's just a lot of external factors besides who's the best player there that will factor into who wins the tournament. So there definitely are valid points to what people say, but it's not just like me in a special case. It's like every player that ever wins a tournament, there's these factors.
On the other side of things, if we look at your 2 best GSL runs, you made it to the round of 16, then lost to MC there. You made it to the round of 8, then lost to MVP, and he went on to win the whole league that year. Do you feel as though your best runs in GSL were like on the opposite side, like kind of a bit unlucky timing in terms of the people you ran into? Like did you have a chance when you played MVP in that series?
Well, yeah, that's like the flip side. There was a lot of tournaments I remember for like 3 or 4 months that I went to, and even though I lost to certain people, every time I lost to someone, they won the final. So it kind of feels like, oh, I could have been second place, but you can't really view tournaments like that. And like versus MVP, I had the choice of going to MLG or not going to an MLG, and the MLG was literally like, I flew to the MLG, and then when I got back, I had no practice for MVP / I played the next day after I got back, or the day when I got back, and I decided to take that sacrifice. Of course, I didn't do that great MLG. I think it was like top 8 or something, but obviously I got destroyed by MVP because he didn't go, and he prepared for our series very much so, and I basically didn't practice for it at all. So, yeah, there's always factors, and I think there's a lot more factors than the community realizes that go into every single match that we play. And yeah, it's just you get used to it, and you get used to the criticism, and you just kind of eventually let it roll off your back because no one really knows what it's like, except if you're a top player or you're very much involved in the scene.
As research, I often like to watch a lot of interviews of someone, and what I try to pick out is like certain things they say, like certain excuses or certain reasons that they give a lot of the time for why they lost or why it was going to be difficult. And you're one of the most famous people actually for every time you have a PvP saying like it's a coin flip, it's 50-50. If you lose, you don't necessarily say he was better than me or whatever. It is true you've lost a lot of PvPs, but I mean, when I looked over your record, I could see actually you've won a lot of PvP series as well. Like you won against guys like MC, Naniwa, Hero, Parting, Oz. These are all like, some of these are top players, you know. So is it the case that your career has also benefited from PvP, or do you think the fact that is it such a variable mashup that really there's tournaments where you feel like, oh, I should have gone further there, and vice versa?
PvP has gotten better over the amount of time that it's been in the game, obviously. It's continuing to get better, and it's definitely like moving farther and farther away from the coin flip matchup. I still think it's the worst matchup in the game, but I don't know. Yeah, I've very much been criticized for winning like Orlando, for winning a series of PvPs that made it so I can make the finals, or I only go far in a tournament when I play PvP. So I don't really use it as an excuse anymore, and I try not to look at a matchup racially, PvZ, PvT, PvP, and think like negatively or positively about it. I mean, a lot of Protosses are having problems with Zerg, and that's kind of hard to overlook, but I'm trying to get back to just playing and focusing on doing the best I can, and then nothing else. So, yeah.
Since Zerg is like the big topic at the moment, everyone always says it's the era of the Zergs, they say there's the patch Zergs who aren't so good necessarily, but they're doing so well now. Does the fact that Zerg in general, no matter what way you look at it, has sort of risen up over the last, this year basically, do you think that in some way accounts for your own dip in form? Because, I mean, PvZ's always been like your professed weakness basically, and also you have to look at the fact that there are almost no non-Korean Terrans who make it deep in tournaments, and PvT was your best matchup. Are these real factors?
Protoss has always been lacking in the foreign community as far as like strong players. There's basically me, and then there was basically Nanawa, and to like a lesser degree there's like of course like Mana, Sasa, White Raw, I don't know, just like a lot of really good players, but there's a lot more Terran and Zerg players that are really strong, like Nurture, Scarlet, Thorzane, whoever. I think Zerg is doing really well right now, but I would never contribute that to the slump I'm in, as far as like me doing bad because Zergs are doing better. I just am not playing as well as
Sure, but I mean from the perspective of like your best matchup is the one you get to play almost the least.
No, not really. I think I'm just not practicing enough, to be honest.
Okay, actually, tying into before when we were saying about the period when you considered the best foreigner, whether you consider yourself, like this is what the community kind of put the label on you, the best foreigner. Now, I mean, it's easy to say you're in a slump or you haven't had good results, but I mean, just to contrast it, now there's probably people who would say you're not the best Canadian. Like, where do you see your career at the moment? Like, I think some people get the feeling like over the last few months you kind of just tapped out a bit and you were like, I'm going to play tournaments here and there, but I'm not going to go hardcore into it. Like, maybe you were burned out. Is this anything to this? And like, where do you see yourself now, basically?
Yeah, I've definitely been burned out for a while now. There was a string of tournaments, I think it was last year in ASL. I went to like 4 or 5 tournaments and did bad in every single one of them, and they were all within like the weekend, so I kind of got really burnt out there, and that was almost a year ago. And then I got burnt out again this last time I went to the NASL in Canada, and I practiced really, really hard for my match against Alicia. Like the most I've ever prepared for a match, basically. I did a lot of research, I approached the game in a different way, I did as much as I could, and I lost horribly 3-0. And then after that I was like very, very much demotivated, but I've been struggling for like the last year. It's a combination of a lot of things, some personal, some just getting burnt out from the game. It's fair to say that I'm in a slump right now. I'm actually planning after this IPL to take a break for like a month or two, and then hopefully that with streaming and Heart of the Swarm, I'll be able to get back the motivation I need to be a top player.
Okay, I have two less topics. So one is, you've been to Korea and you lived there almost longer than anyone else I can think of. So it means on one level, you don't have kind of that untapped potential that people can always claim for a foreigner. Like someone like Stefano or Nurcio, they could say, oh, well, they're really good now, but if they went to Korea, they'd get so much better and they'd do this, that, and the other, which might not even be true, but they can always dream it, if you're a fan. Whereas since you've been to Korea for so long, people could say, like, has HuK's potential maxed out because you've had kind of the best possible practice for all this period of time? Is there anything to that?
There is, but it's always going to be more contributed to the person's personal work ethic and what they want out of it. Like if you go to Korea and you don't practice in Korea, Korea doesn't matter at all. But if you're living abroad or you're living in Europe or North America, like Scarlett or Nurcio or whoever, and you practice your heart out and you're playing like 10, 12 hours a day, it's not going to matter if you're playing there or in Korea. Obviously, if you did that in Korea, you'd probably get more practice and you'd be better. But in the end, it's always going to be more up to the person than where they're living.
Okay, the last thing I wanted to ask was, as a way of contrasting kind of the two periods of your career, when you were in Liquid and when you were in EG, do you think it's reasonable to say that maybe the fact that you're in EG means that you're always going to be held to like an impossible standard? Because I think of it from this perspective. If we remember the people who were your teammates at the time that you were in Liquid, a lot of those players didn't do very well, or their results are spotty if they do have success. And so if you're one of those, if you were still in Liquid in that sense, then any of your results after the period when you joined EG, like come those third and fourth places earlier this year, for example, you would be like a foreign hero, like as one of the only foreigners to get this far, and like it wouldn't really matter the other results, people would forget because you're a foreign player. But since you joined DG and then it coincided with when people were saying you were the best foreigner, it feels like unless you can be like one of the best players, even compared to Koreans, you're never going to kind of meet the standard of what people expect from you. Is this how you feel?
I definitely feel like that is true, but I wouldn't attribute it so much to EG. It's just I set that bar as a player for myself when I did so well. So I won Dreamhack and I was like the first foreigner to win an event when Koreans very much went to foreign events. And then I won the first MLG when Koreans started going to MLG after, foreigners couldn't even place top 8 and are still struggling to do anything at MLGs. So I kind of held the torch in that way. And I think no matter what, I'm always going to be held to that standard. So it's not going to matter Team Liquid, Team EG, whatever team I join or stay on or whatever. I'm always going to be held to that HuK where I, was the best foreigner / one of the best in the world, and if I don't make it back there, then I think there's always going to be a certain amount of people that would be disappointed.
Okay, the final words belong to you.
Shout out to my team. Our site is myeg.net, all of our sponsors. My Twitter is @Loranger Chris, thanks to my friends and family, and yeah, that's about it.